I'm originally from Zimbabwe, came to Landa, which is a small university. I believe your body is your temple. Understanding nutrition, understanding what you're putting in is really important if you want to maintain a healthy body and mental just well-being. Food is for the soul. I mean, just nutrition, and it just makes you feel good, especially if it's really good. When you eat that food, it really warms the soul. It's comforting. It's all traditional. Whether you go back to the Bible, food always brought people together. Whether you broke bread, and it's a communion. What I try and do is use a lot of street food and infuse it into my menu, whether it's from Asia, Africa, more of an international blend of foods, ethnic cuisine. People just enjoy those flavors. I would say most of that comes from my heritage, because my mom was Indian, my dad, he's from Egypt. I've always had different cuisines always going on in my household, so I just wanted people to experience that too in the restaurant. In Zimbabwe, my parents owned restaurants, but I was a little smaller then. I never actually cooked. I always wonder where I got it from, but I guess I used to watch my mom cook in the kitchen and just be around the house all the time, and in my dad and mom's restaurant. So I always wanted to open up a restaurant. I use a lot of the ingredients from the market. We have a new market, I think it's been a year old now, but they have tremendous produce. They have everything, so whatever they have that's fresh, we try and use all those ingredients. Everything is produced freshly, all the soups are made fresh, keeps us honest, and you can taste the difference. So that's made us, because you can taste the difference when something is prepared freshly. And growing up, it was really important, because everything was done from scratch. They had the chicken run in the backyard, you had your egg, you had your vegetable garden, so all these fresh ingredients. And that's the way I was brought up, so it reflects in my cooking. We have so many regular customers. Usually people go to a restaurant maybe 2-3 times a month, but we have people visit them 3-4 times a week. It's really gratifying to me to see people happy leaving at the end of the day with a smile on the face and the belly full. If South Carolina was one dish, it would be the sassafras. Sassafras is a fried green tomato, homemade chicken salad, bacon, pimento cheese, and it's all deep fried. The name came about because sassafras is the tallest mountain in South Carolina. Greenwood has really grown, and it's really diverse, and it has a lot to offer. There's a lot of people from up north that are moving down here, so it's really grown in the last 10-15 years, especially with the development of the uptown area. They've really done a fantastic job of attracting new businesses and bringing new people. The quality of life is good schools, good people, and a lot.
Members of the Senate and guests will please rise as we receive our distinguished president.
The Senate will please come to order. Members and guests will remain standing while we're led in our devotion by our wonderful chaplain, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Chaplain?
We read that the psalmist tells us that when I said my foot is slipping, your love, O Lord, supported me. when anxiety was great within me, your consolation brought joy to my soul. From the 94th Psalm, verses 18 and 19. My friends, let us turn to the Lord in prayer. O God of love and mercy, here as this 126th legislative term continues unfolding, it's quite likely that the members of this Senate and their aides together find themselves in circumstances like those the psalmist once described. And that perceived measure of unsteadiness, perhaps, or the awareness of anxiety which comes along with having loose ends that still need tying up, or even tasks facing them that cannot be magically resolved with a snap of one's fingers. All that has to make for a challenging period. Therefore, O Lord, we openly appeal to you this day to grant to each and every one of these leaders the strength and the will to trust your guidance as they work together to do what is best and most meaningful for all of the people of this state we love. May it ever be so, dear God. In your loving name we humbly pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Senator from Cherokee, what purpose do you rise?
Senate.
All of the Senate's been requested is granted. The clerk will please ring the bell. The reading clerk will call the roll of the Senate for you to record your presence.
Mr. Adams is present. Mr. Alexander, present. Mr. Allen, absent. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bennett is present. Mr. Blackman, present. Mr. Bright. Mr. Bright is present. Mr. Campson is present. Mr. Cash is present. Mr. Chaplin, absent. Mr. Clymer. Mr. Clymer is present. Mr. Corbin, present. Mr. Cromer, present. Mr. Davis is present. Mrs. Devine, absent. Mr. Elliott is present. Mr. Fernandez is present. Mr. Gambrell is present. Mr. Garrett is present. Mr. Goldfinch, absent. Mr. Graham, absent. Mr. Grooms is present. Mr. Hembry, present. Mr. Hutto, absent. Mr. Jackson, absent. Mr. Johnson, absent. Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Kennedy is absent. Mr. Kimbrell, absent. Mr. Lieber, absent. Mr. Martin has leave. Mr. Massey is present. Mrs. Matthews is present. Mr. Ott. Mr. Ott. Absent. Mr. Peeler is present. Mr. Rankin. Absent. Mr. Rickenbaugh is present. Mr. Rice is present. Mr. Sabb. Absent. Mr. Stubbs is present. Mr. Sutton is present. Mr. Tedder. Absent. Mr. Turner. Mr. Turner is present. Mr. Verdon is present. Mr. Walker. Absent. Mr. Williams. Absent. Mr. Young. Mr. Young is present. Mr. Zell is present.
All members recorded their presence. Senator Hutto is present. Senator Chaplin is present. Senator Allen is present. I've already got Senator Hutto, already got you. Senator Johnson is present. Senator Ott is present. Senator Devine is present. Senator Graham is present. Senator Tedder is present. Senator Sabb is present. I've got you. I've announced you as you came in. I got you. I got all of you. Have all senators recorded your presence?
Welcome to State House today. I'm Gavin Jackson here in the State House lobby. It's Thursday, May 21st, 2026, and it is day 5 of the special legislative session that Governor Henry McMaster called a week ago, shortly after Sine Die on May 14th. So again, it's been 5 working legislative days since he called that, with the House going back in on Friday, and they were also in on Monday and Tuesday, and then early Wednesday morning when they passed that new congressional map with all 7 congressional districts becoming Republican, as requested by national leaders, including the President of the United States, President Donald Trump. That's been the goal of this redistricting session, to get all 7 congressional districts to be Republican instead of the 6-to-1 split we have right now, with the 6th congressional district being held by Congressman Jim Clyburn, the only Democrat in the state's congressional delegation. So that's been the big push on what's happening right now. We saw a long debate in the House over those 2 days, especially on Monday and Tuesday, that went into the early morning hours on Wednesday. That they got that bill finally passed over to the Senate on Wednesday. That went to the Senate Judiciary Committee on Wednesday afternoon, immediately at 2 o'clock. It went right, they didn't even gavel, and it went straight to them. And they had about 7 hours of committee testimony yesterday. That is the third and final public hearing, I should say, on this matter when it comes to redistricting, which is a stark contrast to the more than 20 meetings that were held back in the 2021 redistricting cycle, not only here in Columbia, but around the state, to get public input on these maps that are typically drawn every 10 years. Right now, we're doing a mid-decade or mid-cycle redistricting effort in an attempt for Republicans to pick up an extra congressional seat ahead of the November primaries. Sorry, midterms. We're running into the primaries in June, but the midterms are coming up in November, as they expect and hope to try and continue to hold on to the Congress. It's a very slim margin, so they're trying to get as many votes as they can around the country. We're one of many states that are doing this. Other states, though, did it earlier. We didn't, though, because lawmakers were not making this a priority last year or earlier this year. In fact, we talked to all House and Senate leadership about this. This was not on anyone's radar. No one wanted to do this, mainly because the U.S. Supreme Court upheld our congressional maps back in 2024, when a lower court had ruled that our map was a racial gerrymander. The U.S. Supreme Court said, no, it's actually a partisan gerrymander, and that's where it's stayed since 2024. Right now, we're under what's going on since the Supreme Court ruled on April 29th on the Louisiana versus Calais decision, where they ruled that Louisiana's congressional maps, in fact, were racially gerrymandered, sending that state back to the drawing board to redraw their maps, suspend their congressional primaries as well. a lot of states have taken that decision as a way for them to start looking at their maps again. That's what's really prompted this entire discussion, and this entire push right now that happened at the end of our legislative session has really thrown everything into a tailspin these last 2 weeks or so, including the fact that we're in a special session. The governor rarely calls these right now, and it's just the Senate gaveling in right now. The House is already in. No one's really here because there's only one thing on the agenda, and that's redistricting. And we expect the senators to get on that bill immediately. And for how long, we don't know. We just heard from Senate Democrats out here talking about this, saying it's not a partisan issue. Of course, all politics are partisan. They're trying to say that this is not partisan because it affects the voters who are just trying to understand what's going on and not be confused as they are right now, because a lot of people don't understand how this process is working. They said to continue to cast your ballots, which begin early in-person voting starts on May 26th. That's on Tuesday. Absentee ballots, thousands of them have already been sent. Hundreds have come back already. And there's confusion over what that means for those ballots. As we know right now from the state commission, the election commission director, Conway Belanja, he was talking about just how these ballots, your ballot will still be counted, but the congressional race will not be counted. If this bill goes through, if this map is approved, that will be what happens going forward for the June 9th primaries. But right now, it's still TBD is what the Senate will do. We're expecting long days of debate. In fact, the Senate Democrats that came out here had 4 big bankers boxes full of amendments. They have about 100 amendments that they're trying to push through. We'll see how that debate goes, especially since we saw what happened in the House. I asked them about what happened in the House when it came to them having their debate limited, what kind of approach they're going to do. They say they have very targeted amendments that they want to see considered in this debate. Again, there has not been enough public input, they say, to really qualify what's happening right now. So they're doing their part to really get as much into this debate as possible, get as much on the record as possible, because we had 7 hours of testimony yesterday in the Senate Judiciary Committee, and we did not hear from the person that drew the maps. It's a fellow out of D.C. who works for the Republican Redistricting Trust. It's a group out of D.C. that drew this map, sent it to the House, and said, this is your map, and that's really what's been all the lawmakers have been operating off of right now going forward. So there's been a lot of contention, especially among Democrats and even some Republicans, about how this has been drawn, especially because it splits up a lot of areas, a lot of communities of interest, and that's going to draw some consternation. I mean, big example everyone's been talking about is how the 3rd Congressional District, which stretches all the way from Oconee, including Clemson University, comes right on down to Columbia and parts of Columbia, including Williams-Brice Stadium. Just an example of just how this map has been drawn, how confusing it is. In fact, I found out that I'm no longer in the 6th Congressional District, I'm in the 3rd Congressional District. You can find that out if you go to the scstatehouse.gov website. Under the House, on the homepage, there's a redistricting link, and you can click there. You can click on the interactive map, and you can see what this map means for you by plugging in your address too. So there's a lot going on right now. We're going to see how this debate starts off in the Senate. They're just gaveling in, getting some quorum calls done, and we are expecting some long days, possibly even being here over the weekend, which is pretty rare for them to do. I think a lot of Memorial Day weekend plans have been canceled as a result of this extended debate. And Democrats are kind of dug in right now. They're looking forward to a long debate, a process that they say deserves this debate because it has been so rushed. So that being said, we're going to keep you up to date on SC Public Radio. We'll bring you those newscasts every morning and evening on Morning Edition and All Things Considered, as well as scpublicradio.org. And on Friday night, on this week in South Carolina, we talk with State House reporters about this redistricting process, as well as what else happened during this session, which kind of got sidetracked in the final 2 weeks just with this entire redistricting process. So a lot to keep up with that we're trying to do for you. We're putting that on the website, as well as just an explainer about what this all means for you going forward. So stay in touch, and we'll be bringing that information to you going forward. And I guess we'll be doing live hits over the weekend too. Maybe we'll see. We'll be airing this, of course, on ETV World and youtube.com/SCETV News. So with that being said, I'm Gavin Jackson here in the State House. We're going to send it over to the Senate right now.
By a vote of 23-14, the motion is adopted. Senator from Edgefield, what purpose do you rise?
Mr. President, I ask to be recognized for an expression of personal interest.
Recognized. Up to 5 minutes. Senator from Edgefield.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, before we get into the day's activities, I wanted to just take a minute to talk about something about which there was a public announcement on Monday. Hopefully everybody saw it. Maybe some of you didn't. But there was an announcement on Monday that NextEra Energy is acquiring Dominion Energy. Now, look, I have made my feelings about Dominion pretty clear. I've not been equivocal about that. But my larger concern is about having people outside of South Carolina make decisions about South Carolinians. And that concern is not alleviated by this decision. Now, I don't know whether NextEra buying Dominion is a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know yet. But I do think it is interesting and probably not coincidental that this announcement was made right after the Public Service Commission made a decision about Dominion's rate case. It is almost certainly not coincidental that this announcement was made right after the Public Service Commission issued a decision on Kennedy's. And I'm sure it's not a coincidence that this announcement was made right after everybody expected the General Assembly to be adjourned. Now, Mr. President, the decisions, the Public Service Commission's decision on the rate case and on Kennedy's, the final orders have not been issued. I don't know whether having NextEra's letterhead as opposed to Dominion's would have affected how ORS and the interveners addressed the rate case. May not have affected it at all. I don't know. I don't know how it would have affected questions and consideration from the commission. I don't know how ORS's decisions or the interveners' decisions would have been different on Kennedy's. I don't know how Santee Cooper's decision might have been different about whether to partner with NextEra versus partnering with Dominion, because that's a different issue. And I don't know whether the commission might have approached that decision differently if they knew they were dealing with NextEra as opposed to Dominion. If I were a commissioner, I wouldn't like that this happens right now because I would feel like I've been duped on something. But I think those are issues, because the final order has not been issued, I would suggest to ORS and the commission that maybe that's something to reopen and take a look at. Just ask some questions anyway. Mr. President, the information that I read indicates that Dominion and NextEra are going to present an application to the commission for approval, seeking a declaration that the acquisition, the merger, is in the public interest. I don't know if it is in the public interest. I don't know that it's not in the public interest. I don't know. But I do know this. If Dominion and NextEra are asking for a declaration from the commission that this merger is in the public interest, having that declaration is in their interest. There's a reason they want it. It's not required. There's a reason they want it. I don't know what that reason is, but I know there is a reason, or else they wouldn't ask for it. So, Mr. President, I speak today just to bring this matter up, give it a little bit more attention, but also to encourage the Office of Regulatory Staff and any potential interveners to really pay attention, ask questions, and make a real determination as to whether this really is beneficial to South Carolina and South Carolinians. And I would also hope that those who serve on the commission, when they are presented with this, would ask questions, would really look into it, and to see, finally, if there is a way to extract more from them so that the Dominion customers who've been paying for a failed nuclear plant for which they are going to receive no benefit, if there's some way that those customers can be compensated for the losses that they had. So, Mr. President, I appreciate your time on that. I just wanted to bring that to light and to encourage those who may participate at the commission to engage in
Senator,
that.
as its
If
time's
Senator
expired,
would yield for a question.
as its time's expiring. So
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to have 3 more minutes for the
is there
speaker to
objection?
speak.
3 more minutes. Is there objection?
Unanimous consent request.
Is there objection to unanimous consent request? Hearing no objection. So ordered. Additional
yield
3
for a
minutes.
question.
Senator yields for question.
Okay, thank you. Senator, do you remember, I don't remember how long ago it's been now, but probably 3 years ago, maybe in that time frame, 2, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, when we were looking at the possibility of selling Santee Cooper because of the debt that they had incurred on those 2 nuclear plants over in Jenkinsville? You remember that?
I remember that. I can't
Yes,
get
sir.
it out of my head.
Yes, sir. Senator, do you remember that NextEra wanted to buy Santee Cooper?
I remember that.
And do you remember what they offered us for it, Senator? I'll refresh your memory.
I
It
don't
was
remember
$500 million that they wanted to pay the state of South Carolina for Santee Cooper. Now, admittedly, they were going to assume the debt that Santee Cooper had at that time. Do you remember that?
That sounds familiar.
Okay. All right. When we were told what the value of Santee Cooper was at that time, I don't remember the exact figure, but it was somewhere between 11 and $13 billion. But that was along with the 5 or 6 billion that they had in outstanding debt for the 2 nuclear plants. Do you remember that?
Yeah, and I think they had significant debt in addition to just VC Summer.
Yeah. But, Senator, I believe, if I remember correctly, maybe you can refresh my memory, but I'm thinking their total debt was somewhere around maybe a little over $6 billion. And with a value of about 12 or $13 billion, they were going to take on that $6+ billion of debt and pay the state of South Carolina $500 million. Senator, do you remember that when we figured it up, that was exactly half of basically the value of Santee Cooper? Do you remember that?
That sounds about right.
Yes, sir.
And well, I was going to say, look, I don't know whether NextEra's intervention here is a good thing or a bad thing. I'm not necessarily prejudging that. What I don't want to have happen is for this thing just to slide through and nobody asks a question.
And Senator, do you realize what gives me a little bit of heartburn is at that time that the current members of the House and the State Senate were inundated with ads on the talk radio shows.
I remember that.
We were inundated, our constituents were inundated with newspaper ads and with mailings saying that the state had no business being in the energy business, which I would have agreed with them, if they would have paid us a fair price and what it was worth, I would have voted for them. But do you remember what a heavy-handed approach that they put on all of the members of the General Assembly in trying to get our constituents to force us to sell Santee Cooper to them at half the price that they were valued at? Do you remember that, Senator?
I remember over that time period, there was a lot of heavy-handedness going on. Now, it doesn't, that pales in comparison to the heavy-handedness of the past week or so. But there was certainly a lot of that. You're right about that.
Senator's time has expired. Time has expired.
Request to extend the time for 3 minutes, please.
Is there objection to an additional 3 minutes? Hearing no objection, so ordered. 3 additional minutes have been granted.
How are you doing, Senator?
I'm good, man. Thank you.
I appreciate your comments earlier, and what a history perhaps you and I have had in this body, as the senator from Lexington has just alluded to, in terms of who thought they were coming to dinner, but about 4 years ago, and who now apparently is coming to dinner in South Carolina. And do you know that I share your concern and the timing and the progress made with a greatly improved, greatly managed, greatly led Santee Cooper that effectively they're at the altar with someone that they have been in good faith negotiating with on behalf of this state. And now, in biblical terms, who was it that thought they were marrying their chosen bride, but who had to get the sister? And how many years did he have to be married to the sister before he had to be married to the second sister?
Well, I think the better analogy might be on the Andy Griffith Show when Ernest T. Bass thought he was marrying Charlene, but instead he got Barney. That's a great episode, by the way. Ernest T. Bass is an awesome character.
Let's try to keep it in the biblical realm.
Okay, yeah.
Although many a sermon preached from a 20-minute segment from Andy Griffith, for a fact.
Those are good shows too, yeah.
But it is, and we love our South Carolina folks. Again, we have all had our history with Richmond and the history of Richmond and me politically, personally,
Sure.
perhaps with not.
And I'm aware of that too. Look,
without,
and I think
well, hold on. Perhaps without fact behind it, but just as was mentioned in terms of the efforts, did you know, Senator Cromer, to force you to sell? Did you know that effort made its way into Horry County at a certain primary election, such that $1.1 million was spent in a 2-week period to try to convince the folks that somebody in Florida had a better idea? And did you know, perhaps it's a new day at NextEra, perhaps it's a new management team, but you're familiar with the term past is prologue?
Sure.
That's going to be a hard past to erase, perhaps no different than you with Richmond and Dominion.
And
difficult past that, again, as Christians, we do get a second chance, we do. But Lord, the Lewis Smedes book, I've invoked this a number of times this week, Forgive and Forget. Lewis Smedes, if you haven't read the book, if you hadn't got it, it is a well-written book on what happens when you do not forgive. It is a cancer that eats us up.
Sure.
But it does not say in that book that you forget. Did you know?
Thank you. And I'll say this, Santee Cooper has turned around 180 degrees from where it was 8 years ago. No question about that. And I understand your concerns on that. I don't know that NextEra is worse than Dominion. I don't know that they're better. But I do think this is something that needs to be evaluated, and I just hope that the ORS and the Commission will give it the attention that it deserves. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator from Edgefield. That brings us to Senator from Orangeburg. What purpose do you raise?
Raise a point of order.
State your point, sir.
I raise a point of order that the bill that appears on our calendar to be in masthead status is not properly in masthead status for today, that being H50. 683, and this motion invokes both Rules 10 and 37. Rule 10 says that the bill, when it's received by the Senate, to be placed on the calendar and go to masthead, and which raises the question of when was it placed on the calendar. Well, every report of a committee is placed on the calendar the following day. The judiciary is clearly a committee, and it was a report of the full committee from yesterday to be placed on the calendar today, which then means that Rule 37 applies when it says that all reports of standing committees shall lie on the table one statewide legislative day for consideration. So I raised the point that even if it's printed on our calendar as in masthead status, that Rule 37 would require that we not be allowed to take it up today because it has not sat on the laid on the table for one calendar day. There are provisions in the rule, as we're all aware, that you can waive those with a vote if you're 6 days before sine die, but we're not 6 days before sine die. We're not in the sine. We didn't adopt the sine die motion, so we're not in the sine die session. There are provisions in Rule 10 that give specific considerations of how you can get around waiting a day for a sine die resolution, but there's not a similar provision for getting around waiting a day for a reapportionment bill, similarly as it is for a budget bill. Even when the budget comes out and it goes to masthead status, we don't take it up that same day because Rule 37 trumps that, and I'll raise that point of order now to say that we would be unable to take this bill up today.
Anyone else wish to speak to the point of order? Anyone else wish to speak to the point of order? Senator from York, Senator Clymer. What purpose do you rise, sir?
Thank you, Mr. President. To speak on the point.
You're recognized to speak on the point.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's often been the practice of the Senate with regard to the calendar and placement of bills on the calendar that rule would apply insofar as a vote on second reading is concerned, but does not prohibit the Senate from considering a matter in the meantime.
Senate will stand at ease.
My name is Chef Rob Masson. I am a native of Rock Hill, South Carolina. In 2020, after a super successful career in the culinary arts field all over the country, I decided to come back home and where my roots were and open counter. I grew up going to church about an eighth of a mile from here, so we had always known about the history of the Friendship Nine. We were in the demo phase, and I remember I personally took apart the facade, took apart the side of the bar, and lifted up the top, and I could see an old dusty pink Formica top, and I was like, whoa, this is actually the original countertop that was here. I literally left the nail holes and the coffee rings and the stains on the counter, and I knew that we were never going to cover that thing up again. When I first originally saw the countertop in its raw form, I guess it was a rush of emotion that this is actually a super cool piece of history. But I think we really just wanted to showcase it. And I'm a firm believer that if we don't continue to talk about all the bad things and just about history in general, then history tends to repeat itself. And we sure don't need that going on anymore. This is something that is so much bigger than us. And we're just very happy that we have the distinct privilege, really, to continue to talk about it. So that's kind of built into our culture here at Counter. We line the seats, we turn them in the same direction towards the door every night, and it's very simply because those seats are always facing the door for those gentlemen to be able to come in this door. Some of them are with us still, and some of them are not, but they're always facing that door. I was introduced to Mr. Williamson from Visit York County, actually, and we sat in here at the counter, and when we sat down, it was like sitting there talking to my grandfather, and we talked for like 45 minutes. We talked about fishing, we talked about the weather, we talked about just life in general, but the entire time that we were hanging out and we were having this conversation, just rubbing his hand
Since back in session,
the whole time
Senator
on that countertop.
Georgetown, what purpose do you
And
rise, sir?
that's when the light.
To the points of order,
Yes, sir. Mr. President,
you're recognized, sir.
thank you. Mr. President, just one point of clarity I heard in the senator from Orangeburg's point. We can waive if we're within I think he said within 6 days of the sine die. Right now, we are always within 6 days of the sine die. So in fact, and I know the point is not necessarily that point, but every single day that we are here beyond a non-sine die, we are within 6 days of a sine die. So certainly we could move to waive. Thank you.
Senator from Orangeburg, what purpose do you rise?
I'll just say I don't think that's the proper interpretation of what sine die means, because obviously we didn't adopt the sine die resolution, and when we adjourned on Thursday, the governor called us back into special session. But even then, I would say when we came in on the governor's callback, we met and went into perfunctory session. And yesterday's perfunctory session, I would suggest to you, ended at around 12:30, whenever y'all ended perfunctory session yesterday. So the bill couldn't have even been received yesterday if we were out of the perfunctory session that we came in on. So the bill would need to be read for the first time today, which is going to get back to the same argument that even if it's read today, it needs to lay on the calendar today before we can take it up. But I am raising a separate point that the rules of perfunctory session are that you come in, you go out, and we did that yesterday, middle of the day-ish. When the report came in last night, I guess it was walked over here, but we were out of perfunctory session for yesterday at that point in time. The other thing I would point out to you that every other time we've had perfunctory sessions that I've gone back and looked at, we've had a calendar. We had no calendar yesterday. And I think that speaks again to the point that the rules of perfunctory session are that it's just that, it's perfunctory. We came in, we went out. We did that middle of the day yesterday like we did I guess every other time we go into perfunctory session. So I'd add that into the mix for your consideration.
Senate will continue to stand at ease.
Prescribed burning, also known as controlled burning, are planned fires conducted under specific conditions to achieve various land management goals. In South Carolina, more than 500,000 acres of land are burned each year through prescribed burnings. These intentional fires are an essential tool in managing the state's diverse ecosystems, including forests, grasslands, and wetlands. While the concept of intentionally setting fires may seem counterintuitive, the prescribed burnings offer a range of benefits for both the environment and society. They are also quite a spectacle when you get to see them from the sky. Prescribed burnings offer numerous benefits. They reduce fuel loads, lowering the risk of uncontrolled wildfires, and restore habitats by removing overgrowth and invasive species. Additionally, prescribed burnings improve forest health, particularly in pine forests, by reducing competition from hardwoods and encouraging the growth of desirable species. One of the primary agencies responsible for conducting prescribed burnings in South Carolina is the South Carolina Forestry Commission. Working closely with other agencies like the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, landowners, communities, and other stakeholders, they ensure the prescribed burnings are conducted safely and effectively. The process of conducting a prescribed burn involves precise planning and execution. Fire managers begin by strategically igniting a backfire or backburn, which burns against the prevailing wind. This intentional strategy creates a slower moving, more manageable fire. Once the backfire is established, additional methods like flank fires and head fires are used to fill in the burn area. These fires are carefully controlled to limit the heat intensity and smoke production, ensuring they stay within acceptable levels. The goal is to create a mosaic pattern.
Before us is H. 5683, the senator from Horry. Senator Rankin, what purpose do you rise, sir?
To present a brief report on yesterday's action on the committee part.
You're recognized. Senator Morey, Senator
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, for the 2.5 of you that watched yesterday, the effectively 7.5 hour meeting, the 2.5, because I dare say the half did not become the whole because you fell asleep midway. Do I have a witness? I don't. But I want you to know that the full committee was there, present and engaged, and mostly in their seats. Again, unlike the House that had to sit in their seats for 3 hours plus, we were a little more lax in that. And I want to preface my comments today with effectively what I said to those that sat in yesterday, in effectively an unchartered process, an unchartered hearing, an unchartered committee, such that as I addressed to them the question, why are we here today, yesterday, and again I say, why are we here today? And I announced to them that we find ourselves in a process that looks very different from prior redistricting efforts. And we are all familiar with that, some of us less so if you were a freshman than others, but that we did in 2021 that spanned 2 years and 4 months, I think, from stem to stern, whereby we held public hearings around the state. And I think for a fact, and again, Ms. Benson, Breed and John will correct me, but we met in every congressional district in the state. There was a dedicated public website whereby, in that instance, folks could publish, they could see, they could react, they could submit. And then whereby, again, for the Senate's purposes, we had a map room available to our Senate members. And that room was a well-trod, carpet-worn room whereby numerous folks came and went. And so that is not what you have before you today. And the procedures that we abided by then, again, were generated by what we consider the census, and every 10 years, whereby we apportion folks who have moved into our state from certain districts, perhaps out of certain districts, but nonetheless, as our state has grown 400,000+, we believe in the last 4.5, 5 years, a dramatically different state now than it was then. But again, that is the normal process. And so this process, again, which I talked about last week or two, what is the process going to be? It is based on the consideration of whether to join the House in their map, which I don't believe they amended. Y'all correct me if I'm wrong. And to, again, consider what we had to consider and before us. And so at the early part of that meeting yesterday, we had a little bit of a discussion about which guidelines that we needed to abide. Excuse me, can I get my notebook? Or
have somebody.
Give me that white book. If I don't let go of the podium, do I have it? This is almost like that competition when you're competing to get the car, but you got to keep your hand on it. And first time you take your hand off, you're out. Y'all know that? Anybody old enough to know what I'm talking about? Dion Tedder does not know. Coastal Mall in Conway, folks, and we got plenty of time to talk. Coastal Mall in Conway, that was the buzz. That was the bee's knees, man. That was it. Downtown Conway is kind of not downtown anymore. All this real retail is going to this fancy new mall, and in the center of this mall, they had a car, and there was a competition. I'm about 8, 9, or 10, and we biked over to the Coastal Mall because they had a great drugstore and a great ice cream store. The drugstore had a fountain. Anyway, folks were sitting there holding their hands, laying down, pillows, touching the car. And it looked as weird as this word picture I'm painting for you hopefully projects. What in the world are they doing? And so they are competing to be the last, not hold out, but hold on to the car. And the last hand, foot, nose, whatever body part touched the car, the last person that survived it, what, Senator Sabb? Won the car. This is not a car that I'm holding on to here, folks. This is not the prize. But anyway, so thank you for the handoff here. But y'all, I mentioned the guidelines that we talked about and that we typically adopt, that we do based on the current lay of the land from the U.S. Constitution. So to the point of that guideline, there were questions about, in our committee, whether to abide by ours, the old, or to adopt the House redistricting criteria. And so, unlike previous Senate redistricting efforts, we are considering only whether to join the House in passing this plan, along with any amendments, again, that may be offered here. Again, to my knowledge, none have been offered over there. And so the considered opinion from staff and council is that it is not necessary for us to follow the extra procedures we used in 2021 through 22. And again, that may be a subject for debate in here and or in amendments, but the timing of the House passage of this bill and the expediency, the exigencies, the hurry, the time, whatever you want to call it, exigencies of the timing of this election makes it impossible for us to do everything the same as we had done it before. And so the hope here is that our committee and you as a Senate are using all constitutionally and legally required procedures to consider the bill, to give it as full and deliberate a consideration as we can in the limited time that we've been given, and that our constituencies deserve. And so we corporately, with reservations of rights, adopted the House criteria that it used to craft its plan in keeping with our prior practices and procedures. So now, let me tack to the process, and I'm not going to be up here long, I pray, other than Conway and stories I won't belabor. But again, this process, and no doubt about it, it is different than we've ever had before. Questions asked about who we'll get to hear from. What time do we have to hear from? And so we got this, the House introduced their bill on May the 7th. It got second reading on Tuesday, and it was a vote of 74 to 36. It was read a third time and sent here yesterday when it was introduced and referred to our committee and again reported out last night with reservations for everyone to make amendments as they see fit. So again, about 7 hours, we heard from 54 people, 76 members signed up. Folks, the very last speaker was from Spartanburg, Senator Massey. He was in the Liberty Fellows with you may be aware. And did ever he speak eloquently, just like another Liberty Fellows scholar, and perhaps there are more in this room, I think there are. But nonetheless, he waited and he spoke last. There were 54 who spoke, 4 spoke in support of the bill. All others were either opposed to the bill. Some we heard nonpartisan. We heard from the mayor of, mayor of Mount Pleasant, and a councilman, Mr. Haney and Mr. Brownstein, I believe. Again, in nonpartisan fashion, we heard from mayors, we heard from council members. But in terms of the input that we've heard as of 11 this morning, we've received written testimony to the redistricting email account from more than 300 people. And currently, we are processing dozens of written responses that were provided by hand at last night's meeting. So the staff is working to put all that together, and that will be made available to each of you digitally to read and consider as you want. So we've heard from those who support and those who oppose the bill, but written testimony, again, the mix there, again, 4 for, majority against, but the written testimony is largely in opposition to the bill itself. So again, we now have a different landscape than we are in the traditional redistricting efforts, and we'll have plenty of time to talk about that, and this body is going to decide whether we've heard enough or not. But from the testimony we heard yesterday, specifically only one we would call expert, but not expert with a bias, because he's the State Election Commission Executive Director, Conway Belangia, who's been on the job about 5-ish weeks. And forgive me for those who heard it last night, I likened his 5 weeks to marriage to me on behalf of my wife, Lindsay, who on the 28th will have suffered me 15 years. She says every year should be measured in dog years. That's 1 to 7, y'all do the math. Perhaps like my time up here, measured in dog years. Anyway, but he has done a fantastic job, and he is absorbing this, drinking in with a fire hose as to what we've got. What did he tell us? And again, this is a narrative, not editorializing or shading it. Again, we'll get to hear from others, but presently, as of yesterday at 2:30 when we called him, there were 11,500 ballots sent out. They have received 2,500 ballots. Of those, 800 military were sent out, with about 300 of those already received back again as of yesterday. He explained that if we pass new maps, any votes for congressional candidates through mail-in or in person, of course, we know will be negated. And that we will have to build new ballots, test new ballots for special primary and potential runoff. But he gave us a hard stop. We cannot do that until after the June primary runoffs. And so it requires June runoffs to end and then get ballots ready for the July 4th UACAVA deadline for our military voting members and their timeline. He said that there's a 10-day time frame from shutting down voting system and from runoff to mail out the UACAVA. And they said they will work to assist our counties. We heard from one county, Richland County, Senator Devine, Mr. Alexander, I believe his name was, in terms of the concern about finances. They're going to go to county council apparently this week to ask for more money. But that, the Election Commission said that they will work to assist us with that, or assist them with that. He did say that additional precinct splits will cause more work and will need to be done manually. And then perhaps some were surprised to hear it, but the updated budget estimate for the special primary and runoff is $5.3 to $6 million. The financial impact statement as of May 14 was 2.5 of additional non-recurring expenses for the primary and $1 million for the runoff. The initial estimate to the House was $2.5 million. One of our members of the press, Nick, submitted a tweet highlighting a particular exchange that the House had appropriated $1 million. That may be for legal fees, but we can parse that later. What does this bill do? Again, they adopted a new map for congressional districts. They adopted 5684 to the bill, which was a second bill adopting process and procedure for this year's congressional election in the event that the new map is passed. The timing sets a special primary for congressional districts to August 18th. UACAVA deadline for August 18th. I meant, if I didn't say it before, August 18th. The deadline for UACAVA would be July the 4th. Filing period for the congressional districts would open at noon on June 1st and close at noon on June the 5th, assuming we pass this bill as the House has passed over to us. Written certification by the parties for the primary would be due no later than June the 9th. If necessary, a runoff would be held on September the 1st. Written certification by the parties for the general election would be no later than noon on September the 9th. Only votes cast in the special primary and subsequent runoff, if necessary, of the U.S. House candidates may be counted for purposes of determining names that will appear on the November 3rd general ballot. No votes cast in the June 9th state primary for candidates for U.S. House will be counted for these purposes. And a few more. The bill requires each county board of voter registration and elections to post signs or other appropriate notices in conspicuous locations informing voters of the impact of the provisions of this bill on their ballots. And I got to believe you'll hear an exchange, bless you, Senator Chaplin, that Senator Devine had with Mr. Alexander, or actually Senator Tedder, I believe, about who's going to let folks know their budget, their manpower to put the word out. Ultimately, voters and candidates are going to have to do that. But we are requiring them as well to put those signs in appropriate notice in spots. Next, in conducting the special primaries and runoffs, each county board of voter registration elections may combine polling places for reasons including but not limited to the availability of poll workers and polling locations, providing there's adequate notice and access to polling places. And then the bill requires the State Election Commission to issue a refund to those who have filed a filing fee for the June 9th primary, but those who do not file again for the August 18th primary. So the question for us, and as tasked with the charge of President Alexander and the passage of this sine die resolution, we have before us a bill that each of you are going to get to decide whether it is constitutionally and or perhaps not constitutionally, not legally, but whether it is within your judgment, some would say the right thing to do, the party thing to do, the partisan thing to do, or the right vote to make. My process and our process, admittedly, is not what we've done before. But by the same token, we've never been called back here before by a governor who's at the end of his term. We've never been called back for any special redistricting that affects anyone other than ourselves, and we've never had special redistricting. Compression of time brought about forces perhaps that everyone will get to talk about and decide what you want to do. Again, these are not easy questions. We've compressed more in 6 hours with testimony, and I don't know, Senator Sabb, we've got to count, I know Paula would have it, how many people have spoke in the last, I call it the world tour, but we had 72 folks there. They couldn't wait. Some of these folks fell out, but at 54 speakers and 300 submissions, clearly we have compressed into a little bit of time what normally takes a longer time. I'm not passing judgment on that. Again, that's going to be a vote each of you make here. And so the question for us, and that we're being asked to determine to accept, reject, or amend the bill, and that'll be up to each of us now. So I'm going to yield for a few questions, but then I'm going to turn this over to perhaps, well, no doubt perhaps, but smarter people than me to discuss this.
Senator from Calhoun, what purpose do you rise?
The senator from Horry would answer a couple of questions.
Try to.
Senator, your question.
I've got faith in you. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Chairman, I appreciated the fact that you, took the time to make sure the body understood that we had 54 members of the public that were able to come and testify before the committee yesterday and into the night, correct? Yeah. I'm not going to try to age you, but I'm just wondering, how many redistricting processes have you been through?
Not as many as Paula Benson.
Okay. But it's safe to assume you were the chairman of Judiciary, just threw Paula right under the bus.
No, she's young.
Yeah.
She doesn't suffer dog ears like folks in my world.
You were the chairman of the Judiciary Committee the last time that we did reapportionment under the normal process following the census, the 2020 census, correct? How does that number of 54 compare to the number of folks that were able to testify under a normal redistricting process? I think I remember hearing yesterday a discussion that it took 2 years The redistricting process after the 2020 census took 2 years to complete, and we heard testimony that members of both the House and the Senate went around the state to receive testimony. Do you have any idea how many folks were able to testify during that process?
Well, my comments just now, as a volunteer, Senator Saab, perhaps we can get that number from Ms. Benson. I don't know. I just don't know. But I would say it would be clearly more than that. Some
Significantly more, I would imagine.
potentially, but they didn't